Good evening, friends. Welcome to one more session on discussions related to different sociological topics. So, before we start our discussion, some basic announcements here. If you need any help with the preparation strategy, the link is here. If you need help with answer writing, the link is here. The recorded webinar, right? So, where you'll find in the portal, the link is here. And any help, any mentorship, help, guidance you need, you can contact on this number. So, let's get started. But before we deep dive into each of these topics, I just want to give you an overview what we are going to discuss. These are the topics that you can see on the screen. The first topic that we're going to talk about is on gig. The first topic that we're going to discuss is on gig workers, right? So every now and then you have different articles, different news pieces related to gig workers. In fact, if some of you are active on social media, you will find multiple threads which are written about the issues that gig workers might be facing. Right? What are some of the difficulties that gig workers might face? What are some of the challenges they might face? And again, different people will give different kind of recommendations. So what we are going to discuss is we'll first try to understand what is gig worker, who is a gig worker, what is the gig economy, right? Why is gig economy in the news? In fact, from the Niti Aayog itself, right, government think tank it also came up with a report related to gig workers. There have been some consulting firms, for example, BCG, right? They have talked about gig economy and its potential. So, why gig economy is in the news and why gig workers are in the news? What are some of the issues they face? What are some of the challenges they face? And we will try to club it up with labor reforms. Right? There were some labor codes which were initiated, which were passed, which were initiated, which were notified. Right? So we'll try to club them together. So this is what is going to be the first topic. And you might be wondering how this is relevant. Keep in mind that Sociology paper 1, it has one topic. It is about work and economic life, right? So there we try to understand formal organizations, informal organizations, how work is changing over a period of time, how work has evolved over a period of time. So this gig economy that we're talking about, it's basically one of those ways by which people are working, right? It is one of those new models which is in the news, and it is not only in news in India, it is in news in different parts of the world, right? In US also, in some of the states, they have passed legislations for gig workers, specifically for social security of gig workers. So that's why this becomes very, very important, relevant from Sociology paper 1 and also paper 2. The next topic that we're going to talk about is caste and landlessness. Now, what is this? Why are we discussing this caste and landlessness? So if you have already studied caste, you have an idea what caste is. Right? Basically, what is your position in the ritual hierarchy? Right? Caste is basically a status-based grouping. But when it comes to land, how much land someone owns, this is something which is part of the class dimension. Right? Those who are owning more land, right? They will belong to a particular class. Those who own less amount of land, they will again belong to a different class. So caste is a status group. How much amount of land you are owning, right? That might give you an idea about your class position. So when we discuss something like this, caste and landlessness, we are trying to find out the class dimensions of caste or caste dimensions of class. We're trying to find out that overlap. Those, and again, you'll find that those who belong to lower caste, so-called lower caste, their ownership of land will be less. Those who belong to castes which are high up in the ritual hierarchy, their ownership of land will be more. So what we will do is we'll look at some of the recent studies. There was an article in EPW from, again, that is going to be our base here. So we will look at these dimensions, caste and landlessness. The next topic is internal borders in India and migration. Now, this is very interesting in the sense that India is one state, right? The state of India. If you look at our constitution, right, again, India is referred to as a state, which again has the state governments, provinces. So, and if you look at our constitution, you have different kinds of fundamental rights. People have the freedom to move to different parts of the country. Article 19 gives you that. So, whatever internal boundaries are there, let's say the boundary between Madhya Pradesh or Maharashtra, or the boundary between Maharashtra and Andhra Pradesh or Karnataka, you have different internal boundaries. Do these boundaries have an impact on migration? Can people, I mean, the law says, the constitution says that people can freely move within the territory of India. Some restrictions are there, again, some are exceptions, but usually, can people or do people move freely from one part of the country to another? How much internal migration happens in India? If let's say there is one place along the state border, right, let's say there's a district along the state border, will people prefer to move across the state border or will they migrate within the same state itself? All those things we are going to take up. Keep in mind, internal migration is something which is very, very important for the economy of the country, again, which has massive repercussions. If there are different kinds of restrictions imposed by the internal borders, growth and all these things will get impacted. And what are the factors which are leading to a situation where people are not crossing the state boundaries? Why are these internal borders acting like that? So that is what we are going to analyze here. So migration is again something which is important. We have in Sociology paper 2 discussion on population, which will talk about migration. So from that perspective, this topic becomes extremely relevant. The next topic is rural shocks during the pandemic. So as we are going through the pandemic, we are discovering different kinds of impacts of the pandemic. Right? The pandemic is not yet over. So in the rural areas, how has the pandemic impacted? What has been its impact on gender basis? What has been its impact on the basis of age? How have the elderly been impacted? How have the young ones been impacted? What has been the impact on males? What has been the impact on females? Right? So all these different kinds of dimensions we will study. What has been the impact on scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, OBCs? What has been the impact on the forward caste? Is there any variation here? So those implications of the pandemic we are going to take up here. The last one, so this is something which is kind of conceptual. We're going to discuss about the evolutionary theories, different kinds of evolutionary theories that we have. How societies change over a period of time. So there are different theories which help you understand how social changes take place. Now, again, the theories which explain social change, where society is right now, how it will move to a new phase, or where it is right now, how it was in the past. So there are different theories to explain these transitions. These are all called theories of social change. Now, there are different theories of social change. Some theories are called the evolutionary theories. So what are these evolutionary theories? What are the different types of evolutionary theories? We'll look at different thinkers here, what they have said, and also we'll look at some of the limitations of these evolutionary theories. And again, we will try to contrast it with some other theories, maybe the cyclical theories. So this is something which is only related to maybe sociology paper 1. Rest of the topics that you see have both sociology 1 and sociology 2 dimensions. This rural shocks, right? You can look at it from the perspective of gender, you can look at it from the perspective of stratification, you can look at it from the perspective of agrarian social structure as well, right? So multiple areas that we are going to touch. So this is what we are going to do today, and we will have the regular discussions just like I have every time. And after each of the topic, right, we will have a question. Now, one thing here I want to point out: the questions that you will see here today, they might be slightly different from the regular questions that we have. This is like the 9th lecture, right? You have been with me through this journey for the last almost 4 months now, right? So now the questions, the difficulty level will be slightly different, and I'm not saying analytically it will be slightly different. What we will do is we'll have questions which will make you, or which will force you to put more effort, in the sense that whatever I'm teaching, that will be there. On top of that, some new components can be there. For some questions, I might link it with some current affair topic. So for that, you have to do your own research. You have to find out, and it will not be something which will not be easily available, right? Most likely, things which are in the public domain, you have to link it with the topics, right? So that is what you have to do extra maybe from this session onwards. We'll try to have this thing, because that way, your own efforts, you will be putting more efforts, and when you're putting these efforts, you will discover new things in the process, and you will be able to again analyze things better. You will be able to put things together. That's also very important, right? How do you put things together in a coherent framework? That is something which we need to build over a period of time, right? So you will be developing those skills as well. So not for all questions, but for some questions, we will do that. So traditional component plus something which is from the contemporary side, right? We'll link it together. So let's get started. The first topic: labor reforms for the gig workers. So first thing, what is gig? Right? What is gig economy? What is platform economy? Right? We need to understand that. So something you can see on the screen, right? So something which has been pointed out again and again, and these kind of statements you will come across in multiple places. The gig economy and the platform economy is relatively new, emerging sector with immense potential for growth and employment generation. Very generic kind of statement, but it is many times, many places you will come across this. The gig economy and platform economy, they have immense potential. They're going to create more jobs. They will help in economic growth, etc. And the Economic Survey 2021 also pointed out the same thing. Now I want you to understand both these terms, the gig economy and platform economy. So what do you mean by gig economy? What do you mean by platform economy? So let's first understand gig economy. Let's first understand the term gig. I'll give you an example. Some of you might have been to, let's say, a restaurant, right? Many of the restaurants, they will have some live band performing. And again, these bands keep on changing, right? Maybe this Tuesday a particular band was there. Next Tuesday another band will be there. And again, not necessarily the band that performed this time will anytime be performing in the same restaurant, right? Not necessarily. But once they have performed in that particular restaurant, right? Maybe till 11 o'clock or 12 o'clock they had to perform, and after that they'll go back. It might be a band, it might be just one singer doing that. So what happens after that? That performer, right? That band or that singer will be paid some money by that restaurant, whoever is the restaurant manager or whoever is owning the restaurant. So what is happening here? That particular singer or that band performed a gig, G-I-G. And for that, they were paid. For that, maybe if it was one singer, he was paid, or if you have a band, they were paid for that. So they performed a gig, and for which they were paid. So point to be noted here is, this was paid for the performance of the task. It was not that these people were employed by that restaurant. It's not that they're going to get salaries. They are getting paid for whatever they did, right? If they're doing it more frequently, let's say on Thursday also they do it, on Saturday they do it, next week also they do it, according to the number of performances and according to the type of performance and other thing, they will be paid for it. So this is what is gig, right? You carry out a particular task and you are paid for it. So this term gig was first used in this music industry, right? So different kinds of musical performances. But now it is used for different kind of other tasks as well. For example, let's say you are a designer and you're not employed with a particular organization, right? You are a designer and you can make posters, brochures, etc. Now there is one organization which is running some marketing campaign, which wants to run a marketing campaign, and they don't have anyone on their payroll permanently. So what they will do, they will try to find people who will basically create brochures, posters, right, for their marketing campaign. And again, once the marketing campaign is over, right, they don't need they don't need a designer. So what they will do, they will hire you. You are the designer here for that particular gig, for that particular assignment. And once you have delivered, again, you can work with someone. Once you have delivered, there is no such relation which is going to happen between that market, that organization, and you. So you perform that gig and you paid for it, and you're paid for it. So gig refers to this, a job that lasts a specific period of time, a specified period of time, and you're paid for that job. You are not, I mean, in a traditional employer-employee relationship, what happens? I am working with, let's say, an organization, and every month I'm going to get a salary, irrespective of how much I'm performing, right? Maybe this month was kind of light. I was not doing a lot of work, but I'll get the same salary. Next month, maybe it's some closing or something is there, some product launch is there, depending on sectors. I have to work more maybe, but I'm getting the same salary. And maybe periodically, yearly, some reviews there, that's a different thing, and I'll get a hike. But again, that salary will remain the same for the next 12 months. And I have to work for that employer. Right? I'm not supposed to work for other employees, right? But the gig workers, right? They can take multiple assignments at the same point of time. That person who's singing in a restaurant can sing in that restaurant on Tuesday, in another restaurant on Wednesday morning in one restaurant, Wednesday evening in another restaurant. The designer can also take up multiple gigs, right? So this is the meaning of a gig. And those who perform gigs, they are the gig workers. A very easy to understand example I can give you. So let's say you are hungry now, right? So, or maybe you can't do much about it. I'm assuming because you're listening to the lecture and you not eat, so you not start eating food now. Let's say it's 10:30, right? We're almost at the end of our discussion. And at this point of time, you're extremely hungry. And maybe you haven't prepared the food, you don't have anything to eat at your home, and maybe you don't stay with your parents who would have possibly managed your food, and you do not have a very loving, caring family or roommate with you who would have prepared for it. So what will you do? You will order food from Zomato or Swiggy. Now, just think about those delivery guys, the Zomato delivery guy or the Swiggy delivery guy. Who are they? Let's say you're ordering food from Zomato, right? That Zomato delivery guy who's coming and going to deliver that food, that person is not a regular employee of Zomato. He's not. He is going to get paid, he or she, right, is going to get paid for that delivery. And how much distance he or she has to travel and all those things. That will decide his incentives. And he might decide to work for the entire night, he might decide to work tomorrow, he might decide not to work tomorrow, tomorrow he might work for Swiggy, or maybe he's doing something else. So depending on the number of deliveries that the person is doing, and depending on the distance of the delivery and bunch of other factors, he's going to pay for it. And he's not an employee of Zomato. They're all example of gig workers. An Uber driver and Ola driver, they're all gig workers. Nowadays you have so many of these hyper local delivery startups, right? Zepto, Blinkit, all these delivery guys, they're all gig workers, right? Urban company, right? So they have they have carpenters, plumbers, electricians, hairdressers, they're all gig workers. So this is what a gig implies, right? You get paid for that particular task, and you're getting, I mean, that job that you're doing, it lasts for a very specified period of time. Now, what is gig economy then? Again, easy to understand, an economy which involves gig workers. But yeah, if you look at the formal definition, is a free market system in which temporary positions are common and organizations hire independent workers for short-term commitments. Right? A lot of these temporary positions are there. Look at urban companies' website, for example. Right? Look at the number of offerings they have. Right? Different kinds of services. And who are going to fulfill these services? Some workers who will do it on a temporary basis. Right? They're all temporary positions and they will do it on a short-term commitment basis. Now, who are the gig workers? I have already explained this. Those who participate in income earning activities outside the traditional long-term employer-employee relationship. Right? So they are not, I mean, in a regular employer-employee relationship, generally people will be having some form of long-term commitment over there. Right? They're not supposed to work outside. They'll get some monthly salaries or fortnightly salaries, whatever, and they will be they're not necessarily paid for specific number of tasks. Right? They're just paid like that. Right? They're supposed to carry out multiple things as part of the job requirements, and they will do it and they'll get paid for it. In a gig economy, that is not the case. This is the Cambridge Dictionary definition of gig workers: a way of working that is based on people having temporary jobs or doing separate pieces of work, each paid separately rather than working for an employer. So this is what this is the meaning of a gig worker. Now, on the screen, you can see multiple examples: Ola drivers, Uber drivers, the delivery guys, etc. The freelancers, they're also gig workers, right? There are a lot of freelancers. There can be independent contractors, many architects, designers, right? They're all gig workers. Now, the question is, why is gig economy in the news? Multiple reasons, right? One is the number of people who are engaged as gig workers. It has increased drastically. Look at the number of platforms that have come up, right? So, for example, Uber, Ola, Zomato, so they're all different platforms, right? They're the ones who are providing these kind of opportunities, right? So the number of opportunities have come up. The number of people who are participating in the gig economy has gone up. The workforce has become more mobile. Previously, the workforce was not mobile. I mean, you are traditionally linked with certain employers, right? But now the number of employment, or not employment, the number of organizations which are these platform economy-based organizations, it has gone up. So the workforce is changing. On top of that, now work can be carried out remotely. So digitization has happened, internet connectivity, and all these things has increased drastically, penetration of all these, especially in urban areas. So all these things have given a boost to the gig economy. And multiple reports, projections are there that gig economy is here to stay. Number of gig workers is going to increase. Number of players in the gig economy is going to increase. And we'll come to that. You might also be wondering about another term, platform economy. So gig economy and platform economy, what is the difference? Right? So I use two terms, right, in the beginning, gig economy and platform economy. So gig economy means this, that there are people who are taking up different gigs, and there are people who are not hiring permanent employees. Instead, they will be having temporary positions, and they are filled by people who are the gig workers. Platform economy means the economy of the platforms, the kind of opportunities that platforms provide. Platforms are again digital. All these Zomato or Uber, they're all online platforms, right? What they're doing, they're basically connecting consumers with producers. What does Zomato do? There is someone who's a producer, the restaurants, and then there are consumers, people like you and you are hungry right now. So Zomato is a platform which is connecting the producers with consumers, and in this platform, you have so many of these producers, you're having so many of these consumers who are enlisted here. Similarly, Uber, Ola, they're also platforms. So platform economy is creating these jobs. But there's a difference between gig economy and platform economy, right? Platform economy will create all these gig economy jobs, but gig economy need not necessarily be platform economy. Sometimes you have these gig economy jobs which is outside platform economy. The example that I gave you, a restaurant, right, which has some musical performance every Tuesday or Thursday, and it is hiring some music band, right, every Tuesday, Thursday, or Saturdays. They're not a platform, but they are not having a permanent singer over there. They're not having a permanent band over there who's employed for them. They are giving gigs. They're basically taking people on a temporary basis, and then they're paying them for that. So gig economy is this. It can be online, it can be offline. Platform economy is something which is online, right? So this is the difference between gig economy and platform economy. Keep in mind. Now, what are some of the estimates about gig economy in India? Like, how large is gig economy? So there was one report which came out in the last 1-2 years. That is a report by Boston Consultancy Group and Michael and Susan Dill Foundation. So they have projected the impact of gig economy in India, or they have projected what is going to be the size of the gig economy in India. So they're saying that at present you have around 80 lakh gig economy jobs, but by 2030 it will be 90 million. So 9 crore jobs will be jobs in the gig economy sector as per this report. But keep in mind that whenever you have these projections, take it with a pinch of salt, right? Did not necessarily become 9 crores, but it shows that the number of jobs is going to increase. Apart from that, they say that more than 50% of the gig jobs are driven by demand for low wage, low skilled work. Right? More than 50% of the jobs are low wage, low skilled. Someone basically delivering food, right? Or someone delivering a courier. Right? These are not very, that does not require a lot of skills, and again the wages will not be very high. Only around 30% of the jobs require some form of specialized skills. So some jobs do exist will be there in the gig economy which are related to specialized skills, right? There can be an architect, right, who is working as a gig worker, freelancer. There might be teachers, there might be content producers, there might be designers, right? So they are all these things require specialized skills. But the number of people with specialized skills in the gig economy will be somewhere around 30%. Mostly at this point of time, the gig economy is constituted of people who will be working for low wages and who have low level of skills. So this is what the BCG report talks about. There are some other data, right? So in 2019-20, some 68 lakh gig workers were there in India. Right, which is also a decent number. 2021, there were around 77 lakh gig economy workers, right? So again, large contribution is coming from the gig economy, right? It is creating decent number of jobs. Now, this is from the same report, the BCG report, the estimates that they have made, right? They have made the projections. So in the next 1 decade, right, by 2030, what are their projections? So they're saying that around 2.35 crore jobs will be created in the gig economy, and most of the jobs will be created in personal services. Some jobs in construction, real estate, some in transportation, logistics, right? Most of the jobs will be in personal services, right? So, for example, salon services and all those things, right? So there you will find most of the jobs. So this is what is the estimate. Now, what are some of the advantages provided by the gig economy? Right? Why are we discussing this? Because it has some advantages. We'll come to the issues, but let's look at some of the positives of the gig economy. First, it is creating new markets and employment opportunities, right? So Ola, Uber, right? So they have created a new market, or this hyper local delivery, right? So again, a new market is created. The market did not exist for that. So new markets are being created. demand is being created for these kind of services, and as demand is being created for these services, right, it also leads to different kinds of employment opportunities. People are getting benefited by this, right? People are getting jobs. If you are availing food delivery and other services, then someone who's providing all these services is getting benefited. If you're availing foot massage using urban company, right, so you are giving employment to someone. So a new market has been created here. Apart from that, it is basically easing the lives of millions of consumers. It is providing on-demand access to goods and services, and it is trying to formalize the informal sector. Many of these people who are providing services would have been in the informal sector, but now again, gradually it is becoming formalized. It is increasing female labor force participation. Many of these gig economy workers, or many of the workers in the gig economy, are females. Right, salon services and all these things are being provided by females. Some females are also taking up jobs which are traditionally considered to be in the domain of male members. Right, so women are doing that. Cab drivers, for example. Some females have started driving for Ola, Uber, and all these apps. It leads to increase in productivity. Right? Some of these platforms, what they do, they also provide training to the workers. Right? As a result of which their skills improve. As a result of which their productivity also increases. They help in price transparency. Just think about it. If I have to take an auto to somewhere, now first thing is I have to think about where can I get the auto. Then I have to go to that place to get an auto. Maybe it is not immediately available. Then I have to haggle for the price. And even if I have decided that, okay, even if I and daughter we decide that, okay, for this place, he will charge me 100 rupees. But when you are taking that route, he will say, okay, the traffic is so much, it took me more time, I had to take a diversion. And finally, at the end, I might have to pay 200 rupees or 150 rupees, whatever he decides, right? I can't escape that. But the platforms, right, they ensure price transparency, right? Whatever is there, it is there. And you will get a breakup of everything. There are certain rules, regulations, norms on the basis of which it happens. You can track work quality, and again, you can review and all those things are there which can help improve organizations. You can also give tips to people. Basically people can be motivated. Apart from that, there is increase in efficiency. Supply demand is highly dynamic in nature, right? So if there is a demand for certain kinds of services, increase in demand for certain kinds of services, all these demands are met because again, the way incentives are aligned. I'll give you an example. Let's say all of a sudden, right, there's in a particular area, people want to now avail a cab service. Right? For example, let's say in many places in India, especially urban areas, you will have certain kinds of night curfew times. Not curfew in the sense, not in the way of section 144. Usually, till 12 o'clock or 1 o'clock, restaurants can remain open. After that, they can't remain. There will be some restrictions by the law enforcement machinery. So usually, what will happen if, let's say, the closing time is 12? So some of these places which have high concentration of restaurants, pubs, etc. So all of a sudden, now everyone will start coming out of these pubs, restaurants, and other places, and they will all start looking for cabs. Now, in the past, what would have happened? All of a sudden, if there is an increase in demand, you will not get cabs. But because of the dynamic nature of platforms, right, services will be provided, maybe at a higher price, right? Service pricing and all those things will be there, but you will get some cabs or some facilities here. And also, some people, like students and all, they have an avenue to work, right, which might not have been there before. So these are all the different kinds of advantages of the economy. Now, look at it from the perspective of the gig economy worker. Right? Is the worker benefiting, or is he at a receiving end? So here there is a trade-off. On one side, the gig economy worker is having some form of liberty. What is the liberty? That worker decides how much he wants to work. The worker decides whether he wants to work tomorrow or not. He's not bound by any of those clauses. Today he might want to work more. He might take up more activities, he might take up more gigs, and he will be paid more. Tomorrow he doesn't want to work. He wants to do something else, he can do that. So when it comes to gig economy, there is this liberty, there is this flexibility. You decide how much amount of work you want to do. If you have something else to do, you can do that. So the worker might prioritize something else over the gig. So that option is there. But there are other perspectives as well. Some researchers, they will say that yes, the workers have more flexibility, or at least on papers, they have more flexibility. But the contract between the workers and the organization is not symmetrical. In this kind of a model, workers' rights, workers' bargaining power is not equal. How? Why? Just think of a traditional organization. You have employers, and these employees, all of them, possibly they know each other. Right? Let's say a factory. Right? In a factory, you know who all are the employees. The employees might have some form of association, they might have some form of union, and they know each other. There's this connect with them. So they have a higher bargaining power. They can demand for different kinds of rights. If the working conditions is detrimental to their health, they might demand for that. If the amount of wages that they're getting is not as per the performance of the organization is making profit, but they're not getting the wages, they might protest against it. They might demand bonus and other things, higher increments. But all these things are not possible. And think about it, the incentives that the workers get in gig economy. Algorithm plays a very significant role here. What are the parameters that the algorithm is taking into consideration? The gig workers don't know about it. It is mostly confidential in nature. So the relationship that exists is not symmetrical. Workers do not have enough bargaining power. In gig economy, the Zomato, whoever is delivering for Zomato, right? They might deliver today, they might deliver tomorrow. Next day they might work for Swiggy. So that form of unionization or formation of these associations might not exist, and as a result of it, the bargaining power is less. Apart from that, the kind of economy that is there, right? On demand, different kinds of services have to be provided. So it can lead to excessive amount of pressure on some of these workers. It can impact their health. Workplace might not be safe. There might be heavy penalties if they are not taking up orders in some cases. Right? The incentives are designed in such a manner, right? 12 deliveries you do, you get something. 11th one, if you are not able to do, again, there will be some form of penal provision. The rewards penalties, again, might not be very, very transparent. So indirectly, what is happening? Even though you are saying that all these things are flexible, right? It is giving more flexibility, but there is some amount of coercion. Undue coercion might be there. So these are the different kinds of trade-offs that are there, right? Flexibility might be there, but there might be this coercion. Now the question is, in the last 1 year or so, there have been different kinds of protests. There have been different kinds of demands. For example, some females who used to work for the platform Urban Club, right? So they have been demanding better work conditions, better increments. When it comes to drivers with Ola, Uber, similar kind of things we have seen, right? Those who have been delivering for Zomato, they have also made different kinds of demands at different points of time. So questions have been raised about the incentive structures. Questions have been raised about the harsh working conditions. Questions have also been asked about again the lack of transparency. So it is worthwhile to discuss what sort of reforms should be there in the social security apparatus. So keep in mind that if you are a traditional employee, you might be eligible for different kinds of benefits. But when you are a gig employee, gig worker, you're not eligible for all these benefits, gratuity and all these things, maternity leave and all those things are not there. So what sort of social security should be there or is there for gig economy workers, and what can be done about it? That's the whole point. But to understand that, first look at what kind of social security exists for labor in India. Do we have any social security for labor in India, or how is the situation when it comes to social security for labor in India? So let's look at some studies here So there have been multiple studies which find out that labor enforcement machinery in India has weakened, especially in the post-globalization period. You have multiple labor laws, and these laws are extremely restrictive. And again, you need to have machinery which implements this, right? Labor inspectors and all these people. But this enforcement has been weakened, especially after globalization, right? Post 1991 period. The focus will be on attracting more investments, and if you keep these strict laws, it will be difficult for organizations might not come and set up their business here. Private investment will get impacted. Foreign direct investment will get impacted. So labor enforcement machinery has weakened over a period of time. Also, David Will says that capital and labor restructuring in the firm has resulted in fissure workplace. So basically, what is happening is firms are now finding out different ways by which they can shed in-house workers. That means those who were on the payroll, right, permanent employees, they try to find out ways by which they can remove them and have less number of permanent employees and have more number of contractual employees or maybe more number of gig workers. Now, what could be the reason why you are having this fissured workplace where you are shedding your permanent workers? Just think about it. In case of India, labor laws tend to be extremely restrictive, right? So if you are having 20 employees, right, or less than 20 employees, you don't have to the number of laws that are applicable to you will be less. If you are having more than 20 employees, then the number of laws will increase, which you have to adhere to. If the number of employees is more than 100, it will increase further. If it is more than 300, it will increase further. So those organizations which have large number of employees, permanent employees on their payroll, they have to adhere so many of these rules and regulations, and it becomes very difficult for them to focus on their business. If you have heard of Factories Act, right, there is one law, Factories Act. Factories Act has like 700 different ways by which an entrepreneur can be put in a jail. Right? So many of these offenses can happen if you are violating. So just think about it. Entrepreneurs, they have to spend a huge amount of time in ensuring that you are complying with these things. When will they do business? Many of these things do not need to have jail time as the punishment. So many organizations, they will try to have less number of employees and they will shed employees. They will rather have contractual employees. Apart from that, labor laws in India have predominantly aimed at protecting the rights of organized workers and not the unorganized workers. Focus is on organized workers and not on unorganized workers. One of the unintended consequences of this is most of the firms will try to remain unorganized, right? They will remain outside the purview of the government, right? So hardly some 7 to 10% of the firms, 7 to 10% of the workers are in organized sector, remaining all are in unorganized sector. Apart from that, there was this subcommittee on National Commission for Enterprises in unorganized sector. They find out that 50% of India's GDP is contributed by unorganized workers, but there's not enough safeguards for them. And even within organized sectors, there has been different ways by which employers try to ensure that they come under as less purview of the government as possible, right? So they will go for casualization of labor. So the point that I want to mention here is, the point I want to, so basically this all summarizes that in case of India, the social security architecture that is there is not good enough, right? Mostly it has been focusing on organized sector, but there also the number of workers in organized sector is quite low, and also there are different kinds of loopholes here, and anyway the enforcement machinery has become weaker over a period of time. So if you are thinking about social security of gig economy workers, right, it's almost non-existent, right? There's not much protection. So in recent times, what has happened is we have, or the government has come up with different labor codes. They're all trying to provide better working conditions for the laborers. So there are 4 labor codes. One has been notified, the remaining are work in progress. So there are labor codes related to wages, labor codes related to industrial relations, labor codes related to occupational safety, health, and other things. And then there is also a code related to social security. So since this has been in the news, there have also been commentators who are saying that there is a scope to improve the position of gig economy workers. And one of the labor code actually talks about gig economy workers, right? So you have 4 codes, but these 3 codes are not talking about gig economy workers. The code on social security, it talks about gig economy workers, and it defines a gig economy worker as a person who participates in work arrangement and earns from such activities outside a traditional employer-employee relationship. So the code on social security defines who is a gig economy worker. But as you can see here, this definition is not very particular, right? It is not very crisp. It says anyone who is outside the traditional employer-employee relationship. So it is very broad, it is very vague. But point to be noted here is, it mentions that a gig economy worker is outside the employer-employee relationship, which implies a gig economy worker will not be considered as an employee. So if there are different kinds of provisions which the employer has to initiate for employees, it will not be applicable to the gig economy workers, because gig economy worker is not considered as an employee. That you have to keep in mind. Now, why is this something which is important? All over, in different places, there is this debate going on whether gig economy workers should be considered as an employee or not. If they're considered as employee, whatever benefits are given to the employees will be passed on to the gig economy workers, which in turn might imply 2 things. The organization, right, who is employing the gig economy workers, their costs will increase, right? Because at this point of time, they don't have permanent people, right, on the payroll. But now they have to think about the social security. They have to pay more, which in turn will impact the growth prospects of these organizations. Also, many times what happens, depending on the dynamic supply and demand, the organizations will have more gig economy rules or they will reduce the gig economy rules. But if you have people who are being considered as employees, you have to provide social security for them. This dynamic nature will get impacted. The entire way by which the gig economy operates, that will get impacted. And some of the gig economy workers, they also might not want to be classified as employees, because if they're classified as employees, the flexibility that they get, that will also get hindered, right? So this particular, whatever law that we have right now, it is not really clear about what is going to be gig workers' position in these codes, how gig economy workers will be treated. But what is clear is they will not be treated as employees, right? And if gig economy workers would have been treated as employees, again, multiple things would have changed, right? And in fact, some gig economy workers might not even want to be treated as full-time employees because it will reduce their flexibility. So now we know who are the gig economy workers, who are the gig workers, what is gig economy, what is platform economy. We know how gig economy is going to play a significant role in future. We know what are some of the advantages, we know some of the challenges. One more thing I want to point out here. See, when people are working in the gig economy, they usually face 2 kinds of problems. One is stability, right? Maybe today they have work, tomorrow they don't have work. That is one challenge. Also, the amount of money that they're making, right? So some of them will be at a low wage, some of them will be at a high wage. So those who are having less wages, they're also facing that issue. So one is stability. Today you have work, tomorrow you don't have. Second thing is you might be earning low wages, right? So what all needs to be done, or what can be the way ahead? So some suggestions are on the screen. First is at the present, you do not have any way by which whatever issues that gig economy workers face, right? Maybe occupational safety, health issues, etc. So those things cannot be discussed. There's no dispute resolution mechanism. And given that so many people will be part of the gig economy, it makes sense to have some form of dispute resolution mechanism. Apart from that, the recent labor code, right, code on social security, talks about setting up a national social security board, but no timeline has been mentioned. If you're having a timeline, then it will be more actionable, it will be more practical. Apart from that, this board will have representation from gig economy workers, but how do you ensure that it is transparent? All these things have to be ensured. Apart from that, the code of industrial relations, it does not talk about gig economy or gig workers. Maybe it can define the nature of contracts between gig workers and the platform. Maybe it can give some model contracts, right? So again, the information asymmetry and all those things that exist can be taken care of. Gig workers would have been covered in the occupational safety, health, working condition code, because many of them will face different kinds of occupational hazard, right? Maybe in some cases they will have these strict timelines. You have to deliver within 20 minutes, 10 minutes. In some cases they have to carry heavy load, which might be impacting their health. So some basic norms can be there, so that their health and safety is taken care of. Right? So that can be there in this code. So this is about gig economy, its significance, how there are different kind of trade-offs here, and what can be done about it. Right? So there is one question that you can see on the screen. Analyze the difficulty in defining gig workers from a legislative point of view. Examine the salient features related to gig workers in the new labor code bills recently tabled in the parliament. Right? So again, this is something which is not difficult for you to answer because most of the things that we discussed are already there. But I would suggest that you go through the codes, right? I mean, at least glance through the codes. PRS is a source which talks about these codes, which will have a summary of these codes. And just go through it, find out what is the position of gig economy here. Maybe it will help you answering the questions better. Or else, gig economy, gig workers, they're not mentioned. They're only mentioned in the code of social security. Apart from that, there is a scope for including them in other parts. And keep in mind, gig economy are not considered as employees, right? They are the ones who are outside the employment relationship, and there is no clear, precise definition of gig economy in the recent codes that we have had. So this is about gig economy. Difficulty in defining gig worker. It is basically different from the traditional employer-employee relationship. That's why it is difficult. And explain that and then talk about it. In case we have any questions till this point. Vani Singh says, whose salary remains same despite more work. See, what I'm saying is in a traditional job, right? Let's say I'm working for, let's say, Infosys, right? Now, the work is not same every month. So maybe in the month of April, I have more work. In the month of May, I did not have enough work. Usually in the month of December, many of these IT firms will not have enough work because generally they will have their clients in US, right? And in US, everything, in the month of December, everyone will be enjoying the Christmas vacations. But my salary will not get reduced in the month of December only because I have this work. In January again, I'll have more work. It doesn't mean that my salary will automatically increase in the month of January. So whatever salary is there, it remains more or less same. And then you'll have those periods when salary gets revised, right? So next year again, maybe in the month of March, there will be some discussion, April will be there, and my salary gets increased. And for the next period, from next year April to next year March, again, the salary will remain same. So that's the point I was talking about. PRS is just Google PRS. Who is asking what is PRS? Just Google PRS, will get it. Basically, it's a body which analyzes. It's an organization. It's not a government organization. It's basically an organization which is not for profit, which analyzes whatever is happening in the parliament. The different kind of laws they will analyze. Not just parliament, sometimes state laws also they analyze, and they will give you quick, crisp summary of all these things. Very good analysis they have. Right. So as part of your civil services preparation, it will be better if you could refer to PRS from time to time. Now let's move to the next topic: caste and landlessness. So what is the linkage? Why are we talking about this thing right now? So what is caste? Right? Caste basically is a status group. Right? You have a ritual hierarchy. Some people are placed at the top of the ritual hierarchy, some people are placed at the bottom of the ritual hierarchy. So caste, so some people who are placed at the top of the ritual hierarchy, they will be given a higher status maybe. Those who are placed at the bottom of the ritual hierarchy, they will be given lesser status. So caste implies this, right? So caste basically gives people different positions in the hierarchy, people and the groupings. Now, how is caste linked with ownership of land? Who owns how much amount of land? Does caste decide that? Is there any correlation here? So that is what we are going to look at. This is what we are going to study for the next few minutes. Right? So Dr. Ambedkar, he was one of the early pioneers to draw some form of connection between land and caste status, focusing in particular on the landlessness of Dalits. So what does it imply? Most likely, the Dalit members of the society will have lesser ownership of land. If you look at landlessness, Dalit members will have lesser ownership of land, and Dalits are the ones who are placed at the bottom of the caste hierarchy. In fact, they're placed outside the caste hierarchy. So this is what we are going to analyze. Most of the reforms that we have had before independence and mostly after independence, the focus has been on ensuring that those who are the original tillers of the land, they should get access to the land. Most of the land reform programs. So there was this landed class which did not have enough interest in cultivation. Right? There will be a class which owns the land, but it was not cultivating the land. The zamindars, for example, the traditional landlords. So they were the ones who were owning the land, but they were not cultivating it. Someone else was cultivating it. And those who were cultivating it, they had to give a share of their whatever produce to the landlords in some cases. In some cases, they had to give some fixed amount of revenue. So different kinds of land revenue system, land tenure systems were there. So after independence, whatever reforms were initiated, the focus has been on ensuring that those who are the original tillers of the land, they should get access to the land. They should be the owners of the land. But despite all these things, in most of the regions in India, you'll find that certain people, certain groups, they are the ones who are holding the lands. In most of the regions, you'll find that you'll have some caste. They are the land-owning caste. They will be holding the land. And others will be dependent on this particular caste. So this is how things look like. What we will do is, we will look at some data points, right, which will give you a better picture. Now, again, this is something that was there in EPW, the handout that has been given to you, refers to the literature. And this is on the basis of NSO data, right? So the EPW article refers to the NSO data, and the NSO data is this. What they have done is they have tried to find out ownership of land among different communities, the scheduled castes, the scheduled tribes, the OBCs, and those who are not scheduled tribe, not scheduled caste, not OBCs, they're referring to them as others, right? So others means those who are not scheduled caste, not scheduled tribe, not OBCs, right? Those are basically the forward caste. So they find out that the average size of the landholding for a scheduled caste household is 0.52 hectares. For other households, that means non-SC, non-ST, non-OBC, right? Most likely the privileged caste, it is 1.05 hectares. Look at the difference, right? Almost twice. So those who are from the forward caste, their landholding size, average size is almost double. Now, landholdings which are smaller than 0.4 hectares, there are different sizes of landholdings. The landholdings which are lesser than 0.4 hectares, how much of that is owned by scheduled caste households, how much of them is owned by other households. So those lands which are very small in size, less than 0.4 hectares, about half is owned by the scheduled caste households. When it comes to the privileged classes, privileged caste, 33% of it is owned. So basically, the smaller lands that are there, mostly it is owned by the scheduled caste households. And keep in mind, the population of scheduled caste in the population of scheduled caste in the total population is also low, right? It's almost around 15%. Right? So scheduled caste population is around 15%, but when it comes to these small lands, more than 50%, almost 50% is owned by the scheduled caste. What about the larger size lands? Land holding which is, let's say, greater than 2 hectares. So scheduled caste, 6% of them, 6% of it is owned by the scheduled caste. Scheduled tribe 10%, OBC 12%, others it is 16%. Right? So the larger lands, the scheduled caste, they own a very small portion of that. So this is the image that you can see, which reflects that. Right? So blue means smaller land holdings. Red is slightly larger land holdings, 2 to 10 hectares, and greater than 10 hectares is this, right, the green one. So you can observe the scheduled caste members, basically the kind of land that they hold, right, it is mostly very small in size. Right? So that is what we want to point out here. Now you might be wondering, why are we talking about size of the land and all these things? So keep in mind, if you are having small lands, right, just think about it, how much agricultural production can be there in that. Right? So agricultural production will be less. On top of that, if you want to use modern methods, if you want to increase productivity, you need to have larger lands, because you cannot use machines and other methods here. So if you are having small pieces of land, again, your incomes will be very less because any of the production is less, and you can't scale it up further. Right? So you are at a disadvantage. Right? So if you are having large lands, again, it will be more production will be more, productivity will be more. Now there have been multiple reports which talk about landlessness in India. Multiple studies, multiple reports, multiple committees. So let's look at some of these things. Right? What is the status of landlessness in India? How many people do not have access to any land? So there was one task force one committee in 2009. It finds out that landless has seen an dramatic increase from about 40% in 1991 to 52% in 2004-2005. So landlessness has increased in this period, right? Almost 15 years, it increased by around 12%. SEC 2011, they find out that households without land accounted for 56.4% of all rural households. So basically, 100 million households are landless in rural areas, which implies around, just think of it, right? 100 million households, which implies around 500 million people. Right? So 50 crore people do not have access to land. So imagine the scenario, right? In rural areas, what is the kind of economy that you have? It is agrarian economy. People have to participate in agricultural activities. That is how rural areas are defined. And 50 crore people in rural areas do not own land, but they are in agriculture sector, which implies they are working for someone else. Right? So they're mostly agricultural laborers. Right? So if they are not owning their land, just think of it, right? How much amount of money people can earn as agricultural laborers? Not much. So they have a very difficult life, precarious life. Now, the census of India, it says 47.3% farmers are landless tillers. Dalit farmers, 71% of whom are landless, are extremely vulnerable. Now, another way to look at it. These many people, 47.3% are landless tillers. So basically, they don't own land, but they will be working for someone else. Now, if you have to look at it from another angle, so they don't own land, but keep in mind, land is very important. I'm not talking just from the agriculture perspective. Just think about it. How are different kinds of government policy schemes implemented? Or how is someone recognized as a farmer? The different policies that you hear about, right? That okay, the farmers will be given 6,000 rupees for this particular year, or the farmers will be provided these subsidies. Farmers will be provided some income support. The farmers will be given loan waivers. Who are these farmers? All these landless tillers that we're talking about, they're not considered as farmers. So all the different kinds of benefits and all these things that are there is not applicable to them. So those who own land, they get the benefits. Those who are the landless tillers, they don't get the benefits. In fact, for getting a loan also, right, you might need different kinds of documentation. If you are having a land, getting a loan will be easier. Without owning a land, it will not, how will you not have a mortgage, right? So getting a loan and other things will also become difficult. So if there are so many people who are just landless tillers, right, look at the economic situation of these people. Now, why are we discussing all these things, right? Why marginalization of landlessness matters? So different reports have been there, and they find out the reason why landlessness needs to be taken care of. So keep in mind that India, more than 50% of the population, right, they are in the rural areas. And they are dependent on the rural economy, which is basically agrarian economy. That is the reason ownership of land is important. If people had been in urban areas and they were landless, it would have been different because you have options in the manufacturing sector and the services sector. But here, people are in the rural areas, which is basically an agrarian economy, and they are not owning land. They're cultivating for someone else. They're working as agricultural laborers for someone else. So that dynamics you have to keep in mind. So there was this national land reforms policy, draft national land reforms policy. It is saying that landlessness is basically a strong indicator of poverty. If you have high amount of landlessness, it implies you have a lot of people who are poor. And if people do not have access to land, which implies people will have a lower social status, and they will not be having enough means by which they can subsist, or they can earn things which is required for their sustenance. Right? So they have to be dependent on others. They will be dependent on, let's say, informal money lenders for their basic requirements. Also, land can give people identity. It can give them reputation. Also, it can give them incentives so that they participate in different activities. Right? If people have own land, then they will be incentivized to invest in the land so that the production increases. If people do not have enough of these things, then they will not be even incentivized. And it can pave way. Access to land can pave way. Reduction in landlessness can pave way for economic and social justice. Some other points here. The Oxford Poverty and Human Development Initiative, it comes up with what is called as multidimensional poverty index, MPI. Now, over a period of time, India has done better when it comes to reducing multidimensional poverty. But now also, large amount of multidimensional poverty exists. So the report points out that one of the reasons why you have large levels of multidimensional poverty is because of landlessness. Right? So land-related policies can help reduce poverty. That is what the MPI report also talks about. There are some studies, for example, Bestley study. It finds out that the different reforms that we have initiated, tenancy reforms that was initiated in India, it has reduced farmers' dependence on intermediaries, and it has led to reduction in poverty. So tenancy reforms, basically, who is working on someone's land and producing crops, right? That person is a tenant, right? He's not owning the land, but he's cultivating on someone's land. So different kinds of tenancy reforms were initiated in India in 1960s, 70s. All these things have led to reduction in poverty, and so basically, Bestley points out that all these things point to the fact that you should have more amount of land reforms. Thomas Piketty looks at data from around the world, and he finds out that in some other places, for example, Spain, France, they also had ternary societies. So in these societies, what used to happen was there will be some classes. They will have some engagement with one another. And as a result of that engagement, these classes though they will be small in number, right? Numerically they will be small in number. They will be able to acquire property. They will be able to hold on to property, right? So in France, in Spain, it finds out. I'll give you an example of this. In France, right, they had what is called as the estate system. And in this, what used to happen? Three estates were there, right? One was the clergy, one was the nobility, and then the third estate. So there was some form of engagement arrangement between the clergy and the nobility, which ensured that this clergy and nobility, they had access to most of the resources. Right? They will be the land, especially the nobility will be the landed elite. So Thomas Piketty tries to find out some form of correlation with the Indian context as well. So Piketty is saying that in case of India, the two castes, right, the Brahmins and the Kshatriyas, right, they have had different kinds of arrangements in the past, as a result of which they have been the ones who have owned different kinds of properties. Right. So this is what he finds out. The priestly and the warrior class in Western countries, they had some mutual understanding, as a result of which it has led to unequal distribution of resources. The priestly and the warrior classes over there. In case of India, priestly and warrior castes will be Brahmins and the Kshatriyas. Another study points out that 1% rise in the Dalit population can lead to increase in inequality by 0.2%. So if the proportion of Dalits in the population increases, inequality increases, which implies that Dalits are extremely deprived. Right. So this is what is Piketty's viewpoint. Now, have there been any initiatives to bring about land reforms in the Indian context? Right. So we know that there is landlessness. We know that okay, this many people are landless, and we know why land is important. Right. Prestige, incentives, social status, identity, bunch of things. And it is now restricted to certain sections of the population. We also saw how land is distributed. Mostly the scheduled caste community, they do not have enough access to land. They are the ones who are holding the smaller land holdings. So what have been different kinds of attempts made? So there was this Committee on State Alienation in 2009, and they are saying that landlessness increased. And they're pointing out that landlessness or increase in landlessness is one of the reasons why there was Maoist violence in some parts of the country. Also, some commentators will say that look at the places where you have had Maoist violence, right? Which were those places which are part of the Red Corridor. These are also the places where Jamindari system was established, which is also the place where, again, just think about it. Jamindari system means you are creating a new class of people who are the owners of land but who are not cultivating on that land. Land acquisition process, right? It has been happening. There have been different places where land acquisition has happened, and whenever there is any land acquisition, right? So land is acquired from a particular place, and then again, whoever have been staying in that place, they will be compensated for it. They might be resettled, they might be rehabilitated. Now, all these things can lead to changes in the society over there, right? So what have been some of the changes? So there was a case study in the handout. Also, you have been given that case study, and the researchers find out what all impact it had on the society. They find out that it led to an increase in economic gap between the landless laborers and the landowners, right? So whoever were the landowners over there, right? So they will be the ones who get benefited because the land was acquired. But in that region, whoever were the landless, they will not get benefited. And in many places, the landowners, they got some compensation, and immediately, right, they're getting some lump sum amount of money, which is now changing their attitudes. It is changing their spending. In some places, they developed consumerist culture. Sudden flow of wealth has been there, right? Some of you might be able to relate with this. Some places near NCR region, right? So here again, the land prices went up in the last couple of decades, and many people found it more advantageous to sell their land rather than cultivate on it. And all of a sudden, they will have money, and then they will acquire different kinds of things. The consumerist culture that we say, right? So here, generally, when you consume something, when you purchase something, why do you purchase something? So that you'll be meeting certain objectives. I purchase a phone because it will be helping me communicate with you. It will make my life easier. Maybe I'll be able to read things on my phone. I'll be able to work on my phone. But sometimes, if you're consuming something which is basically an end in itself, you are purchasing something so that it becomes an end in itself. Let's say I'm purchasing a very some people do it, by the way, not all. Maybe someone is purchasing an Apple phone, right? It might give someone a different status that the third person is purchasing it. So here, consumption is an end in itself. It's not a means. So that is called consumerism, consumeristic culture. So what they find out is some of these people who are the landowners, they're getting some amount of money, they're purchasing high-end SUVs, they're going for branded clothes, etc. Conflicts are also increasing in many places. Alcoholism, domestic violence, all these things are also increasing in some of these places. The village head, right? The perception towards the village head is different, or many people think that the village head has played a very shrewd role. People feel that the village head now wants to enter into politics, and they have agreed to whatever was being offered. They have tried to convince the members of the village so that they will give up the land. So generally, the village head was perceived to be a culprit. What else is happening? Those who are the landless, those who are the Dalits, right? Dalits, land ownership is quite less. Then there are those who are the landless. Now, they are the ones who are not getting benefited. Many times, the different kinds of confrontation is there with others. They are the ones who are going out of these spaces. They're possibly moving to the cities, right? Some of them are facing different kinds of distress. There were instances of suicides. Caste-based confrontations have also increased. What happens? Caste conflict increases, and later on, this will become even larger, it will snowball, and eventually, it will be used as a way to acquire their land. So these all things have been happening. The case study reflects all these things. So these are the different kinds of socioeconomic changes that are happening with the process of land acquisition. So overall, if I have to summarize, right? So there's a linkage between caste and class here. Ownership of land will be a class dimension. What is caste? What is their position in the regional hierarchy status? Those who are having high position in the caste hierarchy, they're also having better access to land. Those who are having lower position in the caste hierarchy, they're having less access to land, right? And land is something which has multiple impacts, right? Identity, status, income, everything. Land has a bearing in the rural economy. So those who are having lower caste or those who belong to the lower caste groups, they will all get impacted like this. Those who are above the higher caste, they will be benefited, right? So whatever inequality is there, it increases further. On top of that, the land reform process has not been very successful. There are different limitations. On top of that, we have one-handed land acquisition. The process of land acquisition also does not benefit everyone equally, right? The dominant classes, the dominant caste, they benefit, while the marginalized caste, the Dalit caste, they are the ones who are at the receiving end, right? So this is how the policies related to land has impacted communities at different levels. So this is what was the gist of the entire discussion. Explain how regional hierarchy of caste is linked with economic hierarchy of unequal access to land. Critically examine the government initiative in providing distributive justice with regards to land distribution. So first part, we already talked about it. The second part, how different kinds of policies, right? The land acquisition policies, for example, right? How it has impacted. Talk forest right legislations, how it has impacted. Land reforms mechanism, how it has impacted. Right? So you can talk about all these things here. But here there is one thing. To answer these questions, you might need some help. You have to do some research as well. In Sociology paper 2, there is a section on land reforms, right? You might have to refer to that. So that also is linked with the redistributive justice part. So this is about caste and landlessness. Landlessness means those who do not have access to land, those who do not own land. Yeah. So now let's move to the next topic. This is an interesting topic, and I want you to participate here. We'll do that. So internal borders and migration. Why are we discussing this? What we are discussing? Within India, you have different states. You have people migrating from one part to another. People migrate within states, people migrate outside the states as well. For example, some of you might be in Delhi, but you would have been born and brought up in Bihar. Maybe. Some of you might be in Chennai right now. But again, you are someone who is Marathi, maybe from Maharashtra, you have moved to Chennai. So all these things are instances of migration. So what we will do is, in the next 15 minutes or so, we'll try to understand the status of internal migration in India. Right? What are the data, what is the data, what are the numbers, and how it looks like. And one thing that we will be focusing on is how do people migrate between states? Do people migrate between states? What is the extent of people migrating across state boundaries? We'll see that. So that is going to be an interesting thing. Again, new research has found out these variations. First thing, who is a migrant? So on the screen, you can see a definition of migrants, who's a migrant, and this is a definition by the International Organization of Migration, the UN agency. And this definition captures everything. It captures both international migrants, it also captures domestic migrants, right? Migrants within the country. So a migrant is any person who is moving or has moved across an international border or within a state away from his or her habitual place of residence. A migrant can move across the international border, a migrant can move within the national borders as well. But he or she is moving from his habitual place of residence. Now, this person is considered a migrant regardless of the person's legal status, whether the movement is voluntary or involuntary, what the causes of my movement are, what the length of stay is. Each of these points are important. Legal status. A person might be a student, might be on a student visa somewhere. A person might be on an employment visa. A person might be on a spouse visa. All of them are migrants. Right? So whatever your legal status, you are a migrant. The movement is voluntary or involuntary. Sometimes people want to move from one place to another. They have decided. And they have moved from one country to another, or they have moved from one state to another. They are migrant. But sometimes the movement can be involuntary. There can be people who are trafficked. It happens, right? Children might be trafficked. Girls might be trafficked from one place to another. Trafficking happens across countries, right? From India to maybe some countries in Southeast Asia, from Southeast Asian countries to India. So in that case, the person, the child or the female, did not want to move, did not want to migrate. It was involuntary. But once they are in the other country, they are considered as migrants. What are the causes of the movement? Doesn't matter. The cause can be different. It can be, you might want to have a better economic life, you might want to have better jobs, or you might have moved because of climatic reasons, or maybe there was a natural calamity, natural disaster at your place. That's the reason you wanted to move to a place which is much more safe. So irrespective of the cause of the movement, the person is treated as a migrant. And again, whatever is the length of the stay doesn't matter. So this is the meaning of the term migrate. Now, why do people migrate? Bunch of reasons. Right? Some will go for better work opportunities. Some will go migrate to join their family. Some will migrate to study. In India, women primarily migrate to join a family. Women primarily migrate so that they can, whenever they get married, right, they migrate. Usually we have petri local setups, right? Whenever there is a marriage, it is the female who moves to the husband's place. So, and husband's place need not necessarily be in the same place. It might be in another state, it might be another state. The husband might be working in some other place as a migrant. So women migrate when they are getting married. Mostly women migrate because of that. Sometimes people migrate to escape conflict, to escape persecution, terrorism, human rights violation. And in recent times, another factor of migration is different kinds of changes that are happening in our environment. Climate is changing, extreme weather events have increased, natural calamities are happening. So people are migrating so that they can escape all these things. So we now know what is migration, who is a migrant, and why people are migrating. Now think about it. Is migration important? What is the role of migration? See, migration is something which is essential, which is important. Usually there is this perspective that migrants have come, it is going to impact our economy, we don't have enough services and all those things. Usually there is this perception that if a region has migrants, the migrants will take up all the resources. But is it true? Do migrants always take up all the resources, or do migrants only take up the resources? Come to think of it, migrants also contribute to the economy. Migrants provide different kinds of services, and migrants provide these services which possibly the natives would not have provided for at that same wage rates. So usually, whenever there is this discussion about migration, only one side is taken into consideration, that migrants will be a drain on the resources. But that's not true. Migrants provide different kind of opportunities. They can, in fact, they provide services, and eventually they might also create jobs. Think of countries like US, right? They are the countries which have been built by migrants. Look at some of these companies which are based out of US. Look at their founders. Look at their CEOs. They're all migrants. So the perception that migrants are a drain on the economy is incorrect. Right? Migrants contribute to the economy. Maybe initially when they're coming to a particular region, maybe at that point of time they will need some support. But eventually they're going to provide services. Look at cities in India, Bangalore, Delhi. Who is doing the construction? Who is providing different kinds of services like household services, cooking? Who is doing that? It is usually the migrants. And all these services will not be there if migrants are not there, or the cost of the services will be huge. So migrants have immense role in the economy of a region. Now the question is, in India, what is the status of migration? Do we have a lot of migration happening within India? Usually there is this perception that in India there's a lot of migration. But that might not be true. In case of India, I'll come to the numbers, but let's look at what are the laws. What do the laws say? In case of India, our constitution gives people the freedom to move from one place to another. You have Article 19 of the constitution. It says that people can freely move from one place to another. People can take up different occupations in different parts of the country. There are some reasonable restrictions. For example, in tribal areas and all, you cannot, in some tribal areas you cannot move or you cannot acquire property, but again, these are exceptions. But what is the law? According to our laws, you can freely move to the length and breadth of the country. But there is an interesting puzzle here. In case of India, migration is kind of restricted. We don't have enough migration. 2011, it points out that in India we have like 45 crore internal migrants, right? And it includes people who have moved from one district to another within the same state. It includes people who have moved from one state to another state. Like all the different kinds of migrants, if you club them together, it is 450 crores, 45 crores, 450 million. So from one district to another also people are moving, it has been counted here, and this total number is 45 crores. And if you are arranging countries in terms of internal migration, India is among the bottom. So there was this survey between 80 countries. So they found that they looked at how much internal migration is happening between 2000 and 2010. First they looked at migration that is happening between 2005 and 2006 to 2010. They find out that in India, the extent of internal migration is at the lowest. So India ranked last when it comes to internal migration. And I'll give you some more data. You can look at the pattern of migration that happens. It can be rural to rural, it can be rural to urban, it can be urban to rural, it can be urban to urban. Different kinds of migrations can be. Look at this. In India, most of the migration is rural to rural, 21 crores. Rural to urban migration is 8 crores. Urban to rural migration is 8 crores. Urban to urban migration is very low, 3 crores. Right? So usually there is this perception that our cities are getting flooded with migrants, which is incorrect. Most of the migration in India is rural to rural. Cities are not getting flooded with migrants. We see a lot of migrants, or we see that there are slums because our cities have not been able to accommodate our governance, our urban governance, housing governance, all these things have not been very successful. So most of the migration in India is happening between rural areas. Another way to look at this: do we have people migrating from one state to another, or do we have people mostly migrating within the same states? So interstate migration is 88%. Interstate migration is 12%. So people do not even cross state boundaries. Very few people. If there are 100 people who are migrating, just 12 would have crossed the state boundaries. They would have moved to another state. Most of the people stay within the same state. They don't cross the state boundaries. And whatever interstate migration is happening, again, there are few flows or few particular directions, very few particular directions in which this migration happens. Mostly people from UP, Bihar going to Maharashtra and Delhi. So UP, Bihar, they were the largest source of interstate migrants. Maharashtra, Delhi, they are the largest recipient of migrants. Right? So that is how things look like. So the point is, you don't have people moving across states. Now comes the interesting part. There's already not much here. I want you to look at this particular graph, this particular diagram, and I have a question for you which you have to answer. I'll give you some hints here. See, you can see there is this red is Nagpur, and this is the border. The yellow line that you see is the border. Right? So this is basically the yellow line is the border between Maharashtra and Madhya Pradesh. Okay, and this is basically Chhattisgarh, Madhya Pradesh, and Maharashtra. You don't need to know the name of the places. Don't worry about it. See what this particular image is showing you. Again, I'm just giving you the color codes. You have to identify what is the meaning of this. So Nagpur is in the red, and this particular image basically tells you how many migrants are coming to Nagpur from which districts. So darker the shade means more migrants from that place. So for example, there is Wardha here, which is kind of dark in color. Amravati here, dark in color. So darker the shade, more the migrants from this place in Nagpur. This is again another place which is very dark in shade. So color code is there. Darker the shade, more migrants in Nagpur from that place. So now can you put it in the chat box? What do you observe here? Apart from what I mentioned, do you think enough interstate migration is happening or not? Can you think about it? Can you put it in the chat box? Anything that you interpret here? Dampuru says there is, Dampuru Mansa says high intrastate migration is there. Hey, see, Bala, this particular chart is for migrants to Nagpur, right? We have not considered another, let's say if you want to understand Amravati, right? So it would have been a different chart. Here we are just focusing on Nagpur and we are trying to find out what kind of migrants are coming from which place, right? Whichever migrants have come to Nagpur, they have come from which place. Aparna says majority of the migration has happened within the state of Maharashtra. Yeah, anything else? You are correct. Shivani says more interstate migration is there. Border towns contributing more to migration, we can't say that, Nishan. Vishal has an important point. Interstate is lower, intrastate migration is more. Vishal, we don't know about Vidarbha culture at this point. I mean, I don't know that. I mean, again, maybe you know it, you have read it separately. I'm asking you, just look at this particular image and you have to point out that. Yeah, I mean, some of you have pointed this correctly. See, just look at it. Most of the dark shaded places are on this side of the border, on the Maharashtra side. See, Nagpur is sharing the border with Chhattisgarh, right? Some of the places, Nagpur is sharing border with Chhindwara, Nagpur is sharing border with Sioni. Nagpur also is very close to Balaghat. But migrants from these places, which is in MP, to Nagpur is very low. Most of the migrants are from this side, from the Maharashtra side. Very few migrants from the Madhya Pradesh side. Similarly, migrants from Chhattisgarh is also less. So what I'm trying to say here is, even if you're sharing a border with another district which is part of another state, people are not coming from there. Only those places which are in the same state, we are having more people. This is another diagram. Similar, the same thing. Here you have the state borders. Only difference here is this shows from Nagpur to which places the people are moving, right? So from Nagpur, how people are migrating to other districts. So the darker the shade, more migrants from Nagpur to this place. So here again, you will find that the darker shades are on the side of Maharashtra, which implies that more people from Nagpur are moving to Maharashtra districts rather than districts on this side of the border. Which also points out that out migration is also within the same state. In the first case, in migration was there. In migration was again within the same state. Out migration is also within the same state. Which also implies intrastate migration is more. Interstate migration is less. So if distance was the only factor, people could have migrated here also, no? But distance is not the only factor. State is becoming an important factor. So this is one very important insight here. What is happening? We have created these administrative boundaries, right? All these boundaries that you see. Again, all these things have been drawn. It did not exist. At some point of time, these boundaries would not have been there, but we have created these boundaries. And in future also new states would have been, we can be carved. Andhra Pradesh, divided into Telangana and Andhra Pradesh, right? So will it have a bearing on people moving from this side of Andhra Pradesh to Telangana or from Telangana to Andhra Pradesh? May have a bearing. So the point to be noted here is, within states, migration is more. From state to another place, even if the distance is less, migration is less. All these things are whatever we already discussed. So why is this the case? Why you have more intrastate migration and why interstate migration is less? One of the reasons could be, see, the kind of benefits that you get, the different kinds of social welfare benefits that you get, like ration and all those things, PDS and all these things. See, even though the union government funds a substantial part of it, but it is administered by the state governments. And in case of India, portability of benefits is not that easy. And nowadays we are talking about one India, one Aadhaar and all these things, one ration. But for a long period of time, that was not the case. So if someone moves from Nagpur to the other side, let's say Chhindwara, again, they have to get multiple approvals and other things. It might not be that easy. So it's better to shift to your own side. You can deal with the state governments better and the state government might recognize. So one of the reasons is subsidized food and all these things, different kinds of benefits. Access to healthcare facilities also becomes difficult. Many states, they will provide, state governments will provide for education, healthcare and all these things, but ration card will be required. But your ration card in the state will not be applicable in the other states. So this is one of the reasons. Another reason, see, many of these courses that you have, educational courses, skill development courses, state governments will offer these courses. But one of the requirement will be domicile requirement. That means if you have been staying in the state, then you will be eligible for these courses. If your parents are from the state, they will be eligible for it. But if you're going to another state, you cannot meet those domicile requirements. So one of the reasons why people migrate is for education, for skill development. But that is getting restricted because you do not have domicile over there. So it's better to move to another place in my own state rather than move to the other state. Another thing they find out, apart from these universities and technical educations, government jobs. Those who are high skilled, among them there is a preference for government jobs. And again, government jobs will have all these domicile requirements. Right? So if there is domicile requirement that you should have the domicile of Madhya Pradesh, then only you will get government jobs in Madhya Pradesh. So again, it will restrict people from Maharashtra, from Nagpur region to move towards Madhya Pradesh. And if you are in Maharashtra, you will have the domicile of Maharashtra, you will be eligible for writing different government jobs. So government jobs also, preference for government jobs among the high skilled people. So this is the reason why internal migration tends to be restricted. So this is what is happening. Already we have talked about it. So if you have to analyze this, right, within the state of India, as per constitution, you have the freedom to move. Right, you can move to any place in India. You can practice, profess, you can start different businesses in any part of India. But does it happen in reality? It is not. We have borders. These borders, again, ideally we should be able to move across borders. But what is happening in reality is the restrictions are there. Even if restrictions are not there, people are doing some form of evaluation and they are not moving across the borders. Right? Because social benefits and other things, there is lack of access. So within the state, there are these internal borders which prevent migration of people across the borders. So this is what is the cause of concern here. Purna says language is different in different states. See, keep in mind that we're talking about the bordering regions, right? In bordering regions, language will not be that different, right? In Nagpur or Chindwara, the language might not be that different. Yes, if let's say we're talking about migration of people from Nagpur to let's say Chennai or Nagpur to let's say Guwahati, yes, there will be massive language difference. But the thing that you saw here, right, it is again across the border, contiguous regions, right? Language will not vary that much. Yeah, so let's move to the next topic. So for this question, you have to look at a report by Niti Aayog. So the question is, discuss the salient features of national migration policy. Regional Niti Aayog gives some innovative solutions to improve the conditions of migrant workers in India. Right. So in the beginning, I mentioned that you will be required to look at some of these things which is part of your preparation. So take it as an assignment. Look at this particular policy by Niti Aayog and try to find out what can be done to increase migration in India. Now this is a very short topic. Rural shocks during the pandemic. Now what we are trying to understand here is the pandemic impacted everyone. Right. You might be rich, you might be poor, you might be women, you might be men. Right. Everyone is getting impacted by the pandemic. But the impact of the pandemic might have been there, but the consequence of the pandemic will be different for different individuals. That is what we'll try to understand. And we'll see what has been the consequence of the pandemic on different sections of the population, different sections of the rural population. That is going to be the focus. The pandemic is equally impacting everyone, right? The disease is out there, but the viral outbreak is out there, but the ability to deal with it will be different for different individuals. Those who will be well off, they will have access to different facilities. The economic opportunities they have, right? They will have more economic opportunities. The kind of risk they face, economic risk, will be comparatively less. As compared to someone who, let's say, a daily wage, they don't have a permanent job, right? So they are maybe today they'll get some work and they'll get paid for it. Tomorrow they will not. Just think about the impact of the pandemic on them. If you are having a lockdown, they're not going to get anything. So the point is, the well-off have better capacity to mitigate against these impacts. The weaker sections don't have it. So what we will do is, we'll look at some recent study which try to analyze how in the rural areas, the impact of the pandemic varied. Right? How it impacted maybe women differently, how it impacted elderly differently, how it impacted scheduled caste, scheduled tribe OBCs differently. But before that, some basic points about India. I mean, again, I don't want to spend time on this because you will already be knowing about it. Before the pandemic, right, how does the economy look like? In case of India, in industries, 24% of the people are employed. In China, it is around, it was 30% in 2013, it reduced to 27.4%. But still, China employs more people in the manufacturing sector. When it comes to services, some 32.2% people are employed in services. In China, it is quite high, 47.25%. In agriculture, again, in case of India, the number of people engaged in agriculture has gradually declined. In China, it is around 25%. Just a comparative picture. See, what we are trying to say here is, in case of India, when it comes to manufacturing sector, when it comes to services sector, right, there are people who are engaged in these sectors. But the number of people engaged in agriculture is quite high. Despite the number of people engaged in agriculture getting reduced over a period of time, it's still high. Right? So in China, it is 25%. In India, the number of people engaged in agriculture will be almost around 50%. Right? So it is comparatively high. Now, what does that imply? This implies that people engaged in agriculture, since the number is large, they will be exposed to different kind of risks, right? Because of the pandemic. But yeah, whatever, we'll come to that. Now, in the rural areas, what are the risks that are there? What are the overall risks which the pandemic imposed on the people? So let's look at some data points here. Rural areas, some 70% of India's population is there. Brookings report pointed out that 400 million people face the risk of falling back into poverty. And out of this 400 million, 36% were migrant workers. And they are the ones who will be facing job cuts, wage losses. And we saw that, right? There was mass exodus, reverse migration, all these things happened during the multiple years of the pandemic. Now, what we'll do is we'll refer to one study by Datta and Kar. And again, this is basically a World Bank study. They are studying few states, some 6 states in India, and they are trying to study what happened in the rural areas. So key findings we'll just focus on. Maybe it will be useful for your sociology people to answer it. Right? Sometimes you need some data points, just to look at those data points. What they're finding out, there is a gender dimension. They're finding out that those who lost jobs or those who were not having any occupation during the time of the lockdown, they're trying to find out how many females were not having any occupation, how many non-females, that using the term non-females, right, to include everyone who is not a female. So again, instead of having a binary idea of gender, what they're doing, they're saying females and non-females. So they're saying that among those who do not have any occupation, they find out that females were the ones who did not, I mean, if you compare females with males, females with non-females, females have a higher percentage of not having any occupation. The percentage of females with no occupation is higher than the males. And the biggest gap was in Rajasthan. 70% females did not have any occupation during the lockdown compared to 52% non-females. So this particular image captures that. So black basically denotes how many females did not have any occupation. Gray captures how many non-females did not have any occupation. And you can see in each of the case, except for let's say Andhra Pradesh, which is more or less same, in each of the case, more females did not have jobs during the lockdown. Another parameter they're looking at is age, and they're clubbing it with gender. Here they find out that those who are older, those who are above the age of 35. 35 is the median age, right? So if you arrange people in terms of increasing age or decreasing age, 35 is the middle age. So they find out that those who are above the median age, among them, job losses were quite high. So older adults were more likely to not have any occupation. Younger adults more likely to have daily wages or salary jobs. Females who are above the age of 35, they were more likely to not have a job as compared to females below the age of 35. Females above the age of 35 were more likely to not have a job as compared to others, right? So older people, they were likely to lose their jobs. Women, they're likely to lose their jobs. Women elderly, again, not elderly, women above the age of 35 more likely to lose their jobs. So gender dimension, age dimension. Another thing they saw, individuals belonging to general or other castes had salary jobs on average as compared to individuals belonging to scheduled caste, scheduled tribe OBCs. Individuals belonging to scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, other backward classes had more daily wage jobs compared to upper caste. So now how does this impact or how all these things play out in terms of pandemic? Those who are from the general or other caste, right, they're having salary jobs. Now, if you are having salary jobs, even if there is a lockdown, you will get a salary. But those who are the daily wages, if there is a lockdown, everything is, you're not having any income. So SC, STs, OBCs, they're more likely to have been impacted by the pandemic because they're not holding salary jobs. So those who are from the general caste or who are from the upper caste, they will be better off. Or again, it's not that they're doing better, just that they have some form of security which scheduled caste, scheduled tribe OBCs did not have. So this is what happened in the rural economy. Elderly, more likely to lose jobs. Women, more likely to lose jobs. Elderly women, again, high chances of losing jobs. Scheduled caste, scheduled tribe OBCs, again, more vulnerable because they don't have, they're more likely to not have a salary jobs. So this was one recent study that came out, and I thought I should share with you. Can be important when you're answering sociology paper 2 questions, when they try to link all these things together. Gender, age, population is part of your syllabus. Gender is already there. Class dimensions, they try to include. So with respect to employment market, discuss the impact of COVID on various sections. So if there's a question like this, you can easily answer. You have the data points now. Don't need to remember data points. Just talk about who are more likely to lose jobs or less likely to lose jobs. Now, last part, we'll talk about one concept: evolutionary theories in sociology. Basically, we'll talk about evolutionary theories of social change. So I'll take some 10 minutes, but again, interesting part, important part. I'll just explain what I'm going to talk about so that you have a larger picture. See, societies are not static. Societies keep on changing. The way we see Indian society right now, it would not have been the same. It would have been different 50 years back, 100 years back, 200 years back, 1000 years back. So societies change. And again, in future also it will change. But how do these change happen? I'm not saying what are the factors causing this change. What I'm saying is how these changes take place, right? What is the direction of change? Is there any law? Is there any theory here? If I'm able to understand how we reached at this point of time, maybe we can project later. So many sociologists have been trying to understand that. Right? So they have been trying to understand in which direction change is happening. What is the pattern of change? Does it happen like this in one direction? Does it happen like this? Okay, so sometimes it will peak, sometimes it will fall. Does it happen like this, cyclical? Right? So you are at this point, then you will come to this point, and again you are back to the same point. Does it happen like this, cyclic change? So there are different theories here. Some thinkers will say that there is this linear process happening, evolutionary process of change. Some will say there is a cyclic process of change. So what we will do, we'll talk about the evolutionary theories of change. But before that, what is social change? Social change means society is changing, and the change is happening at 2 levels. One is happening at the structural level, another is happening at the cultural level. Cultural change means values, beliefs, this is changing. Structural change means larger level changes are there. Urbanization, industrialization, they are all examples of structural change. Now, what are some ideas, concepts related to evolutionary, social evolution, evolutionary theories of change? So there are certain principles. What are those principles? First is the state that you are in. It has resulted from some form of modification from the original state. At present, society is in a state, but this is a result of something which has happened in the past. So let's say this was the state in the past, now this is the state. So there has been consistent modification as a result of which you have reached here. So this is one of those principles of social change. So evolutionary theory of social change. Second, some evolutionists, they will say that there is a natural linear order, some direction, linear, right? In one direction, the change is happening. It's not happening like this. It's not that you move in this direction and then you come back in the same direction. No, you're moving in one line, right? One linear direction. Then some evolutionists, what they will say, every society goes through certain states, some phases it will go through, and that will decide the direction. For example, some will say that it moves from primitive, barbaric. These are the phases of society. And the last principle is progress and perfectibility. So the assumption here is the societies are moving in the direction of progress. They're moving in the direction of near perfection. So now maybe you're not perfect, but in future you'll become perfect. And in the past you're even less perfect. So the movement is always in the direction of less perfect to perfect. I'll give you an example. Marx, right? What he was predicting, he was saying that in future there will be social revolution, and there will be revolution, and the revolution will lead to a perfect society, complete society, according to him. And in the society there is no requirement of a state. People will not be owning any property. There will not be any class. People will live in harmony. Right? So now you're having class struggle. Previously also you had class struggle. There is class antagonism. But in future you will have a perfect society. Right? That is what he was visualizing. So the principles are change, order, direction, and you're moving in the direction of perfection, progress. Right? You are gradually improving over what the society was in the past. Now, who are the different thinkers who have this evolutionary perspective? Comte is saying that there are 3 stages along which the society progresses. The first stage is theological stage. At this point of time, everyone is having different kinds of religious beliefs. So in the stage, everyone has supernatural beliefs and all these things. They believe that supernatural powers are controlling everything. Gradually, the society transitions to metaphysical stage. Abstract reasoning and all these things. People start talking in terms of philosophy. Gradually, the society moves to the next stage, positive stage. In positive stage, people start to find out reasons behind things. They will observe things. They will try to find out explanations for different things that they see around them. Positivism comes from this, right? So positive sciences are related to this. In positive sciences, what do? You look at things, you'll observe it, you will experiment, and if you're repeatedly carrying out the same thing, then you will generalize it. So the positivism comes from here. So Comte is saying, in the past, people used to believe in all these gods' beliefs, they had all these religious beliefs, supernatural beliefs, superstitions were there. Then people move towards reasoning, abstract reasoning. Gradually, they will move towards the positive stage. Okay, and so this is what progress is happening. This is how progress is happening according to Comte. So this is what Comte talked about. He's also having this evolutionary perspective. Next thinker is Spencer. Spencer is trying to draw analogy between organism and society. Organism and society. One example. with time, organisms evolve, right? And they become more specialized, differentiated. Similarly, societies also become differentiated and specialized over a period of time. I'll give you an example. Think of amoeba. Amoeba is like one cell, it has just one cell. It will not have different body parts. Or that one cell is carrying out everything, breathing, excretion, everything. Look at the evolved versions, right? Human beings. Right? We have all differentiated body parts, right? We have differentiated systems in our body: respiratory system, nervous system, a bunch of organs, tissues, glands. They're doing multiple things. So they're all specialized in the activities they carry out. So similarly, saying societies also become differentiated. Different within the societies, you'll have different parts carrying out different roles, and they're all becoming specialized. Religious institutions, education institutions, multiple kind of institutions will come. So as there is differentiation, right? So societies will be so differentiation and specializations. Society moves from one phase to another. And Herbert Spencer is giving an example. In the past, societies will be in a primitive state, right? So there will be militarism, there will be different kinds of fighting going on between people, different kinds of armies will be there, warring groups will be there. But over a period of time, the society moves into the state of industrialism. Markets, economy, industrialization will happen, and people will be living in peace. The different social economic groups will live in peace. So from primitive state where you have warring groups to the state of industrialism, right, there is progress. And what is happening? There is differentiation, specialization, and also there is integration. It's not that different institutions within the society are fighting with one another. There are mechanisms by which they are held together. Tyler says that there will be three phases: animism, polytheism, and monotheism. Right. So basically, it is on the basis of cultural development. Morgan says society evolves through three stages: primitive, barbaric, and civilized. Ferdinand Tönnies says he basically says there are two kinds of society. In one society, there is what is called as essential will. In another type of society, there is what is called as arbitrary will. What is the meaning of this? In these societies, traditional societies, the actor sees himself as a means to serve the goals of the social group. The relations that are there, they're called Gemeinschaft relations. These groups are held together by some feelings of brotherhood. Right? So any individual in these societies tries to fulfill the goals of the social groups. But over a period of time, the society changes. It starts getting dominated by arbitrary. In these societies, the individual now tries to achieve his or her own goal, individual goals. So these societies are dominated by Gesellschaft relations. So these are all more collectivistic in nature, these are all individualistic in nature. So again, modern society is more individualistic as compared to traditional society, which is collectivistic. So this is how Ferdinand Tönnies distinguishes between different societies. The last two, Hegel and Marx, what did Hegel say? Hegel is saying that initially ideas develop, thesis. Then there will be opposition to ideas, antithesis. The idea is challenged by that antithesis. Thesis is challenged by antithesis. Both of them will get combined and it will create a new idea, synthesis. Then a new idea now becomes the base. And again, there will be an idea which will challenge the new idea. Again, there will be synthesis between the new idea and the challenger to the new idea. So this is how the societies will progress, right? One idea, opposition to that, amalgamation, synthesis, again thesis, new idea. So this is how societies progress. This is how evolution takes place. Marx talks about it in terms of materialism. Marx says that in societies there will be class struggle. Why there is class struggle? There will be one group of people who are the owners. They are the ones who are owning the means of production. The other section of the population is dependent on them. So there is always this struggle between them. Unequal control over forces of production. And eventually what will happen? The struggle will lead to revolution, which will lead to formation of a communist society, classless society. There will not be any requirement of the government. So these are all different kinds of evolutionary theories. This is basically an illustration of Hegel's idea and Marx's idea. Now the question is, how true have all these been? All these are saying that society will move in this direction. It will evolve. It will move in linear direction. Now, all these things are giving you an idea how societies evolve, how societies change, how societies would have moved from one phase to another. And they were all, they were all very popular at some point of time. But keep in mind, they also have their own limitations. These are all linear theories, right? Later on, cyclical theories also emerged. One example is Pareto's circulation of elite. Sorokin's theory again, that is also cyclical theory. So there have been some other theories which have questioned these models. On top of that, many other issues were there. All these things that we saw right now, did any of these people gather empirical evidence? Not really. Many of these things are not on the basis of empirical evidence. In fact, all these scholars have been referred to as armchair scholars. Also, the theories that we saw right now, they have been used for different purposes. For example, some of these theories were used for justifying colonialism. When you are saying that you're moving from primitive stage to barbaric stage to some other advanced stage, civilization stage, what happened? Many of the colonial powers, when they were trying to acquire colonies or when they acquired colonies, they used to use these theories to justify. They used to say that, okay, wherever they have established the colonies, they will say, okay, you people are primitive, right? You are lagging behind. We are here to colonize you, we are here to modernize you. So many times these theories were used in a very wrong context. Another issue here, just think about it. See, barbaric, right? It is not an advanced stage, right? Barbaric stage. So it is assumed that barbarism is kind of just next to the primitive stage, and the European civilization is at the highest level. But come to think of it, what all happened? World War I, World War II, all these things happened in all these countries, right? The European countries, they're the ones, European countries and some of the Asian countries also, they were involved in this. So weren't World War I, World War II barbaric enough? So some of these things actually reflected the bias of thinkers back then, egocentric, ethnocentric biases of thinkers back then. Right? So all these were different kind of criticism of the evolutionary theories. So what is evolutionary theory? What are the different types of evolutionary perspectives? And what are the criticisms, right? You can directly get questions like this. Many times evolutionary perspectives have been asked before. And if you're studying evolutionary perspective, don't forget to study cyclical perspective also, right? Because it can be relevant. One question, identify shortcomings of the evolutionary theories of socialism. I've already explained that. You can answer it. You can go back and refer to the lectures and you can answer it even better. So this is about the different topics that we covered today. So we'll wrap it up for the day and we'll meet again in the next session. And yeah, so good night. Enjoy whatever is left of the weekend.